Hi, I'm Kimberly from the Fat Quarter Shop, and I have never tried curve piecing, but my really good friend Sherri McConnell is here. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And she's going to show me how to curve piece today, and I'm super excited to learn because I've always wanted to know. And she has designed this exclusive pattern called Daybreak. You can find the pattern on the Fat Quarter Shop website. On the left link bar, we have a free pattern section. The quilt comes in both the size you see behind us and a mini size. So show me what our first step is.
Okay, let's get started.
Today we're going to be showing you how to sew the larger version. You're going to need 2 layer cakes, and if your layer cakes don't have enough background, you're going to add some extra background. You're going to have a border fabric and a binding fabric. And Sherri's going to show us how to use the fabulous Creative Grid Circle Savvy ruler. What curved piecing technique are we doing today?
Okay, well, there are a lot of different curved piecing techniques, but today we're going to use one where we just use our sewing machine for the stitching. There isn't any handwork involved.
Okay, so it's all machine piece, no applique.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're going to start out, we're going to divide our fabrics into lights and darks. And we're going to make the same block, but sometimes we'll be making it with a dark background and sometimes we'll be making it with a light background. We are going to make 20 blocks with dark background sections and 16 blocks with light background sections.
And then you're going to follow your pattern to cut the pieces that we're going to be starting with.
Okay, we're going to demonstrate how to make the blocks. The blocks have a background section and a pie section, and we're going to demonstrate with the Circle Savvy ruler how you cut the sections for each. Regardless of whether the block has a light background or a dark background, we'll be making the blocks the same way. Okay, we're starting by cutting the background section for our block, which has been trimmed to 9.5 inches square, as it shows in the pattern, and we're going to use our Circle Savvy ruler. Now, the Circle Savvy ruler makes it super easy to trim our block. There are lines which we can use to line up with the edge of the fabric, and then there are also curved cutting lines which will make cutting the pieces for this block super easy. So the first thing you do is line up the edge lines of the Circle Savvy ruler with the edges of your fabric, and then we are going to, for the background sections, we are going to use the 11.5 inch cutting line, and this is on the pattern. Now, generally, I like to use a small rotary cutter when cutting curves. It seems to make it a lot easier, but actually I tried both with this ruler and the bigger Olfa rotary cutter worked just as well. So you're going to notice that on the Circle Savvy ruler that the cutting lines extend past the fabric, so you won't have any problem making a smooth cut. And you're just going to insert the rotary cutter at the back of the curve and just follow the curve in the ruler all the way around. After you've cut, you'll have 2 sections, the large background section that we're going to use for this block and the smaller pie section, which we won't be using, and you can add that to your scrap bin. Now we're going to cut the pie sections for our block. Beginning, we are going to use our 7-inch square, and we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to line up the lines with the outer edges of our square, but this time we are going to cut using the 12.5 inch line. So all of the pie sections will be cut using the 12.5 inch slot. And we're just going to put the rotary cutter in, make a smooth cut like we did before. And we have these 2 pieces. This piece will get discarded, and this piece we will use for the pie section of our block.
Show me how we're going to put the block together.
Okay, we have a background section and we have a pie section, and the first thing you're going to notice is they don't really appear to line up, and that's okay.
You've got a lot of extra here and a lot of extra here on the pie.
Right, and that will be taken care of when we sew them together. So the first step is we're going to do a finger press on each piece to find the center. So for the pie section, I fold it over and I line up my edges, and I'm going to finger press right in the center. And I'm going to stick a little pin right where that press mark is, so that I have the true center of my pie section. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the background section. I'm going to fold it together so that the sides match. And then I'm going to put a finger press right in the center. And again, you can still see the little press line, and I'm going to add a pin. So we have the centers of both of our pieces marked, and now we are going to put them together and pin them so that we are ready to sew them. So you start by flipping them right sides together and matching the center pins. And what I do is I like to keep the pins right on top of each other, double check that the fold lines are together, and then I take one of the pins out and use the other pin to secure it. The next thing we're going to do is to line up the short, straight edge of the background piece with the straight edge of the pie section. We're going to put a pin in right there, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side with the other short edge of the background section and the other straight edge of the pie section. And we're going to line those up as well as we can and add a pin. So now we've got our blocks pinned at the edges, our block sections pinned at the edges and the center, and then I just continue pinning. You want to be careful not to stretch the edges any more than you need to. They are bias edges and it's easy to stretch them out of shape, so handle them as carefully as possible and just pin, and you'll notice that the pieces naturally start to fit together.
Yeah, I think they fit together just because of the bias.
Just because the bias allows them to move.
And I don't think you could do this block without pinning. Do you agree?
I agree. It just helps so much. And another thing is that by pinning, if you have all your blocks pinned, you can actually chain piece them all once you sit down at your sewing machine and save even more time. I did that with this quilt, and I just stacked up the blocks for one row at a time and chain pieced them all. So once you have your block pinned, you are ready to take it to your sewing machine and get started with the sewing. Okay, now we're going to sew the background section to the pie section. And today I'm using RFL 2000 in the machine, and I also have a 1/4 inch foot on the machine. We are going to be sewing with the pie section down. You'll notice that now it's very flat, and we'll sew with that on the bottom and our pins in the background section on the top. So I'm going to place the fabric under the machine, and I'm going to start sewing. You might want to sew a little bit more slowly the first few times that you do curved piecing, just to make sure until you get the hang of it, which after a couple blocks you'll be a pro. So start sewing. And you'll notice that the fabric just automatically will curve and go together. I take the pins out as I sew, and I just go slow and move it along. And then we have our piece that has been sewn together, and we are ready to press it. Okay, now we're ready to press the blocks. We will be pressing most of the blocks toward the background section, and you'll find on your pattern instructions specific places where you will need to press towards the pie section. But what I like to do is take the iron and gently press on the back side, press towards the back section. Again, I don't like to push or stretch, these are the bias. And once I've pressed it, I will turn it over to the front and press again and make sure that I don't have any places where the seam hasn't been pressed out. And there we have our block. it's pressed, and we are ready to go to the next step, which is trimming. Okay, now we're going to trim our blocks, and the reason I do that is because I like everything to match up perfectly. Because we've sewn with the bias, there's sometimes a tendency for things to get distorted. One thing we have to remember is that we're only going to trim on the 2 long edges of the background section that don't have any pie section sewn into them. And we're going to trim our blocks to be 9 inches square. We're going to use this Creative Grids ruler, and we're going to line up the 9-inch line on the top and the bottom on the top and the side with the edges of our block. And don't worry if you have a little bit of a difference here, we can trim that off. But we have to be sure that we don't trim anything on the pie section because we want all of our pie sections to match up. So I'm just going to trim these 2 long edges. And then I'm going to make a small trim right here where I notice that that section extended just a tiny bit. But again, we're not going to cut anything off of our pie section. Okay, now we have a perfectly square 9-inch block, and we will trim all of our blocks to measure this size before we start putting them together in the quilt. Okay, continue making blocks until you've made 16 with a light background and 20 blocks with a dark background, using the same technique that we just showed.
And now we're going to put everything into our quilt rows.
Okay, continue making blocks until you have all 36 blocks done, and then the fun begins. You can start to lay out your blocks and place them. Pay attention to the colors and the fabrics, and you might want to move some. We've got 2 teals close together right here, so we're going to switch that and mix up the colors. Once you have everything just the way you want it, you can start sewing your rows together. And when it comes to pressing, press the rows in opposite directions so that the seams will nest when you sew those rows together.
And there's 3 rows that we're going to put together, and the top and the bottom units are actually mirror images, so you can actually sew this, then sew another section, sew it together. Once your quilt center is entirely put together, then you're just going to add your simple borders according to the pattern.
Right.
So as we were sewing this quilt, I fell more and more in love with it, and I actually think I can do this.
Awesome.
So I'm glad to learn a new technique. I hope all of you guys learned also. Make sure to watch all of Sherri McConnell's videos on the Fat Quarter Shop channel, and like, comment, and subscribe to the Fat Quarter Shop YouTube channel. See you next time.